Hi guys, these are just a few examples for the assignment that you have due next week. So these examples are done for you on the assignment, but I just wanted to go through and show you how I did them. So the first one is number 1. It gives you this set of diagrams. You can see step 1, 2, and 3, and you have to complete the table of values and graph the relation. So we've done completing the table of values. So in step 1, you can count that there are 6 squares. In step 2, you can count that there are 10 squares. And in step 3, you can count that there are 14 squares. Now, to continue the table of values, you can either draw the next two patterns, or you can just figure out that every time when we go from 6 to 10 and 10 to 14, we're adding 4 each time and continue adding 4. So 14 plus 4 is 18, and 18 plus 4 is 22. Then to graph them, what we need to do is look at the ordered pairs created by each row of the table. So the first row is step 1 has 6 squares. So if we go on our graph, we find step 1 and we go up to 6 and draw our dot. Okay, the next row in the table is step 2 has 10 squares. So on our graph, we find step 2 and we go all the way up to 10. So this graph doesn't have all the numbers on it. We go from 9 till 12, but we know 10 is just a little bit above 9. So we put a dot just above 9. Okay, so step 3 has 14 squares. So we put a dot at 3 and 14, which is just below 15. And step 4 has 18 squares, so we put a dot at 4 and 18. And step 5 has 22 squares, so we put a dot at 5 and 22. Now, before we can continue on, we have to decide if we need to connect our dots or not. To do that, we have to determine, is there a value that falls in between here? So is there a step between 1 and 2 or a step between 2 and 3? Does it make a sense to have a 1.5 step or a 2.5 step? And it really doesn't. We're just going to go 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. It doesn't make sense to have any in-between numbers, so we don't connect our dots. We leave our graph just like that, and that's it. That's the answer to number 1. The table is completed and the graph is completed. So 2, 3, 4, and 5 are just like this one. If you follow this model and do it the exact same way, you should have no trouble. It changes up when we go 10. So I did number 6 for an example as well. So the difference with number 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 is there's no pattern, there's no diagram or anything like that to follow. You're just given the table of values. So we have the first couple y values here, -5, -3, -1, 1, and 3, and we have to continue. So in order to do that, we have to figure out the pattern. And if you look at the y values you're already given, you can see that you're adding 2 each time. -5 plus 2 is -3, -3 plus 2 is -1, -1 plus 2 is 1, 1 plus 2 is 3, 3 plus 2 is 5, and 5 plus 2 is 7. So those are our next two values. And then we graph them the same way. So on our graph, our x values, our x-axis is the one that runs from side to side. So that's the x values we look for. And the y-axis is the one that runs up and down. So that's the y values we look for. So the first one is -3 and -5. So we find -3 on our x-axis, and then we go down to -5 on our y-axis, which is right there. Then on our next row, it's -2 and -3. So we find -2 on our x-axis and go down to -3 on our y-axis, which is right there. -1 and -1 would be right there. 0 and 1, 2 and 5, and 3 and 7. So this time, when we decide whether we're going to connect our dots or not, when you're just given values, you're not given any diagrams, any kind of word problem, you're just given numbers, you can then consider that we probably would have a 3.5, we probably would have a 1.5 or 2.6, we probably would have values in between. So anytime you're just given the numbers and you're not given a diagram or a pattern to follow or anything like that, then you can certainly connect your dots. which we would do here. Okay, so we connected these dots. So this one is the same as 7, 8, 9, and 10. So you can use this one as a model to answer 7, 8, 9, and 10. In number 7 and possibly some of the questions after that, you do have values that won't fit on the graph. So you can see this graph goes from -8 to +8 in both the x's and y's. I think in number 7 you get 10 as one of your values. If the dot doesn't fit on the graph, don't worry about it. Just skip to the next set of values. Okay, so you might not get every dot on the graph, and that's totally fine.